All right, let's get Todd Myers on. He is our Center for the Environment Director, and it looks like hey, Todd, you're looking good. The first glimpse of camera was still, your camera was still causing you problems, but looking rested and ready right now. So, let's
I need
start
to
with the
get the
code.
tanned filter so that I look, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, they should have that kind of a Trump filter where you could be orange, if you want, or the Ken bronzed filter from Barbie, and then they got filters for everything else, so why not? With cold weather, I wanted to start with this. Usually, there's talk about energy, and there have been. I saw someone on my Facebook post put that they got a message from their energy company saying, "Hey, look, set your thermostat to 68 and try to save on the energy so that we can keep other things going." What have you seen so far that might provide us some lessons on the future of Washington State and what we should be doing based on the use of energy in this cold snap and the production of energy in the cold snap?
Yeah, so Saturday started Friday, and then Saturday it really reached a peak as temperatures got really cold across the whole state and actually across the whole Northwest. What you saw was demand increase dramatically on Friday and then Saturday. At that same time, wind energy went to almost zero. And then on Saturday, Puget Sound Energy had an outage at their natural gas distribution plant, which provided natural gas both for heating and then for some electricity. So the confluence of all of those things caused Puget Sound Energy to send out communication, email, and things like that. It was on Twitter and elsewhere, asking people to conserve. So there's been a lot of kerfuffle about it. I wrote a blog, which I posted yesterday about this. And I think that there's a couple of lessons. The first thing is that as we move away from reliable sources of energy, what are called dispatchable, things that you can turn on and off, like natural gas, like hydro, or even if we don't, tear down Snake River dams or things like that, energy demand is increasing. So we need to meet that demand in new ways. The higher percentage that we rely on wind and solar, the more difficult it will be in situations like Friday and Saturday. When it's very cold or when it's very hot, the wind doesn't blow, it gets very still. And wind energy goes away. And so if a large percentage of your energy is reliant on those sources, you're in trouble. Now, some people say, oh, we'll just build batteries to store all of that energy from other times. And that's fine, but we have had periods of time where we have literally had 5 days with no wind across the Pacific Northwest. One of the other answers is well, we can get energy from Montana. Okay, that's fine. Montana wind blows a little bit at different times, but over the weekend, Montana also had no wind. So you're making your system more fragile the more you rely on it on intermittent sources. And even if you can build enough batteries to deal with it, that's expensive, right? You're paying first for the energy itself, and then second to store the energy and then use it. One of the other lessons, though, I think we have to learn is that consumers need to play more of an active role in electricity. If I ask people, like, what time of year do we use most of electricity? I think most people would know. If I said, what time of day do we use most electricity? People wouldn't know. Even if I ask people, what do you pay per kilowatt hour? People wouldn't know. And the reason of that is that we've had 125 years of basically government control of the amount of electricity and the price. And so people have just sort of said out of sight, out of mind. When you come to a situation where you have shortages or prices go way up, that system doesn't work anymore and people need to have more control. The good thing is we now have the ability to know real-time prices and other things like that. The Puget Sound Energy email sort of was a basic example of that, of saying, hey, energy is short, prices are high, please conserve. But if you've been trained that electricity supply is not your problem, or you've been trained to think that it's always going to be there, whether it is or not, because you don't have a role, because that's government's role, then reaction of people is like, hey, why are you doing this to me? Right? I thought I could, you're in charge of making electricity reliable. But again, if you put it in the hands of politicians, you shouldn't be surprised that occasionally these things are going to happen. And the way to deal with that is not to just scream louder at our politicians that they need to do a better job. The way is to take control. And we can do that by responding to prices, responding to demand. And the good thing is that by using less electricity when prices are high, we save ourselves money. So we have a financial interest in doing this. But people seem reluctant to that because it seems manipulative, when in fact, it's the way we deal with everything else, right? Gasoline, every other commodity, we look at the price and make a decision. That, whether we like it or not, we pay more for electricity when we use it at expensive times, even if it just shows up on our bill at the end of the month. We need more control, and that's got to be part of this discussion. You are muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Don't you think some of the frustration that people have right now, like, in getting messages, it's not so much getting the message, because I think you've pointed out a number of times, on this program and others in the media, that, when consumers are empowered to make decisions for themselves, there was, like in California, I think they had more benefit than programs that had cost, hundreds of millions of dollars. Just giving people a choice and saying, hey, if you use less energy now, we won't have the rolling blackouts. And suddenly they had what they needed. It was tremendous. But I think part of the frustration is when people see that, they resent things like, efforts at dam removal, relying on wind instead of natural gas, supposedly to save the planet, when there's other trade-offs that they're not considering, and the prices go up, and it's not an efficient way to utilize the resources. So I think people see that, and that's how they feel manipulated. Would you agree with that? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, right? They what they say is, your agenda of replacing reliable sources of energy and less expensive sources of energy with unreliable and more expensive, types of energy, is what got you into this problem. And now you're asking me to change my behavior to cover your screw up. Totally get that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. So seems to me there's two solutions to that. One solution is to scream louder at our politicians. I don't have much faith in that approach. I think, politicians are doing what they're doing because of ideology, because they are rewarded by special interests, all those sorts of things. I don't think that that's going to yield much result. Now, this is not to say that we at the Policy Center and others don't point out the costs and the problems, because they do need to have that information. So, I think that that needs to be part of the discussion, is to tell politicians this is screwing up. But I think it is important that consumers have as much control as they can, and giving them more control by transparent price information, and then letting them make their decisions, is something that needs to be done more. So that not just when there's an emergency, but when prices go up in the evening, as they do basically every evening, you can say, oh, I don't need to dry my clothes right now. I can dry them in 2 hours when prices are lower, and find ways to conserve and shift demand on a daily basis. And then, when we have emergencies, you will know, okay, here's what I can do. You will have discovered part of the, you'll figure out how to conserve. Like, one of the things that I got pushback on Twitter was, I'm not going to turn my thermostat down when it's freezing outside. Great. I agree with that. I was cold too. I didn't want to turn my thermostat down. But because I know the electrical system, I also made sure we didn't wash our dishes or dry our clothes. Those are things people go, oh, well, that I can do. But people don't think of those things because they have basically been told, this is not your problem. Let government take control of this. And I think that's where the frustration is getting. It's a combination of, being told that the system is imbalanced and feeling powerless. And that's when people have the reaction that you described. You are on mute again.
You'd think I'd have learned the first time there, but she says, Jana says, yes, what's the real story on utilities sending out these messages? It's super cold in Spokane, but Avista said it's warming up. We were below zero yesterday morning. I think it's a lie. I think it's the instability of the grid, tilting at windmills and solar panels that produce little energy when it's cloudy and cold. And to clarify, they said the emergency was over due to it warming up and people using less energy. However, it did not warm up. So a weather prediction was wrong in Washington State. Wait, what? Yeah.
I don't know what Avista said. I didn't see their message. I can tell you that demand over the last 2 days has gone down. So Saturday was the day that it was worst. And then whether people adjusted or whether it warmed up or for whatever reason, demand went down. We moved out of a space where we were in trouble. Wind still is not back. Natural gas is back. Like I said, there was a shutdown of a Puget Sound energy plant on Saturday, but that was basically back up by Saturday night. And now we have the amount of natural gas that's on the grid is the same basically as it always is. So I don't know what Avista said, but whatever the utility, we shouldn't have to rely on whatever the utilities say is the reason. Right? I also saw people complain that Puget Sound Energy's notification didn't mention the plant shutdown. Okay, but that only matters if the issue was a purely political one and people have no control, right? It doesn't. If you're just looking at prices, if you're trying to decide what's best for you, for your pocketbook, for your comfort, then whatever messages or spin or whatever else utilities or politicians or anybody else puts on it, it doesn't matter. You can look at the prices and say, you know what? I'm willing to pay that price because I'm cold, or I'm not willing to pay that price and I'm going to make some changes. That's the information you need. But as long as we have a system that doesn't provide that information and doesn't give you those incentives, then those messages about here's why we're doing this or things like that, those are the political arguments that become important. And I think we need to make those political arguments less important and individual power more important.
Yeah, just hearing what you said, I was thinking of yesterday when I hit start on the dryer at 5 o'clock, and I thought, I would have waited a couple of hours for that if I'd have been thinking about it. No problem. Yeah. Of course, with 4 kids, my dryer is always almost always operational. So,
and again, you may not have a choice, right? You may say, right, I need this. That's fine. It's like everything else in an economy. There is a price. We pay the price for our choices. We weigh those trade-offs personally, and then we make those decisions. In electricity, because we have been told for so long that, don't worry, other people will make those decisions for you about the trade-offs, that when we are asked to acknowledge those trade-offs, it feels weird, and that's when we feel like we're being manipulated.
From Heidi, Todd, you're saying supply versus demand pricing, not additional taxes to get people to use less, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's what the arguments are, that we need more taxes to force people to make the decisions or to nudge people to make the decisions we want. No, I want people to make decisions about what works for them based on supply and demand.
Wanda says this isn't so much a question as a statement, but you haven't mentioned the incredible, reliable industrial level we have anywhere, has been for decades, is still nuclear power. Energy Northwest is quietly and continually providing what is probably a larger percentage of our current demand than any other single source. Don't let the public down. Keep us honestly informed about energy access and reliability.
Yes. If you look at the graph of electricity supply, which is in the blog I posted yesterday, there is a straight flat line, and that is nuclear. It is reliable. It is always on. It is always there providing base load. Here's the thing that nuclear can't do. It can't load follow and go up and down. Demand changes during the course of the day. It goes way down at night, then it goes back up during the day. Nuclear can provide a basic, level of electricity, but to meet the increases and decreases during the course of the day, we use hydro. Most other states use either coal or natural gas. You can't, and then California now has spent a enormous amount of money on batteries to try to take the solar that's in the middle of the day and move it to night. But though that's what you need. So nuclear is great. Nuclear has, needs to be a part of the system. We need probably more of it. Modular nuclear, small nuclear, does have an ability to load follow more than just big nuclear like the Columbia Generating Station. But unfortunately, we're still years away from that.
Well, I'll add too, we actually did talk somewhat extensively about nuclear power recently when we had Miss America, a nuclear scientist, who's studying nuclear engineering anyway. And now she's former Miss America because over the weekend they had the pageant and the new one's an Army pilot, I think. So another impressive young lady who's Miss America. So, and if you get a chance, you can scroll back through our videos at WashingtonPolicy.org's YouTube channel, and you can see Todd talk about those things.
It occurs to me that the combination of a nuclear engineer and an Army pilot, those two Miss Americas could do a lot.
Yeah, and it's pretty much destroys the whole stereotype of the pageant thing. Like the stereotype of ditzy blonde. Well, the last two blondes, one's the nuclear engineer and the other's the Harvard educated. I think she graduated from the academy, but it was she went to Harvard for a while. Air Force pilot. So these are pretty smart ladies and pretty impressive. Tom asks, he says the marginal market cost of Pacific Northwest Energy electricity over the weekend was 80 cents per kilowatt hour. And yes, zero wind since Saturday. Good thing we had clean, reliable, low-cost hydro operational. P.S. Air source heat pumps don't operate hardly at all when it's 0 degrees out. They run on 20 kilowatt resistance heat. Too bad we don't push that heating peak to natural gas.
So I have a heat pump. I live in the mountains. I can confirm that my heat pump did not do very well. It was very cold. And I got notifications every day on my smart thermostat telling me, boy, your heat pump's running maybe too much. Maybe there's something wrong. It's like, nope, it's just cold. So fortunately, we also have propane backup, which is what you need for a heat pump. So so the combination of which the governor, is constantly pushing more wind and more heat pumps this weekend didn't work out on either front.
What about the legislature, Todd? I know you've always got a handle on a lot of things moving, a lot of parts moving in the legislature, a lot of proposals. Are there any particular bills that have caught your attention so far, surprised you in a positive or negative way?
Well, one great bill is House Bill 2193, which I contributed to. And it would streamline salmon recovery projects. So one of the things that you hear in salmon recovery and then a lot of environmental restoration is the same thing that builders and everybody else complain about is, permitting and regulatory barriers. So House Bill 2193 would create what's called a regulatory sandbox, which has been tried in other states. And what happens then is that if you're doing a salmon recovery project and you get regulatory barriers of any kind, you can go to basically an ombudsman in the state government and say, hey, we're trying to get this done. We're trying to save salmon, but these regulations or this regulation is slowing us down. Can you help us? And what the law would allow is one of three things. First, the regulatory agency could say, yes, this is a problem. We will waive this regulation for you for a limited period of time. If there's something goes wrong, they can reinstate the regulation for that project, but it would waive that regulation. The second thing they can do is they say, nope, we like this regulation. We need to keep it. We're not going to waive it for you. And then the third thing that they could do, which is what we have seen a lot in other states, is that the sandbox can go to the agency and they can say, well, we may not waive the regulation or we'll waive part of it or something like that, but here's a way that we can get done what you need to get done in another way. We would not be the first state to do this. Lots of other states, more than a dozen other states, have this already. Utah, Connecticut, Hawaii, red and blue states, because they recognize that if you're trying to get something done, if you're trying to increase building or you're trying to increase habitat restoration or things like that, why should you shoot yourself in the foot with regulation? And if you have a targeted, problem that you can demonstrate is causing a problem, why should we say, well, okay, we're not going to do anything, but we'll get back to you in 2 years and maybe hopefully the legislature will solve this, right? No, if you have a problem now that's preventing you from doing something good, why say, okay, duly noted, sorry, sucks to be you? We should try to address that problem. When I was on the Salmon Recovery Council, we did exactly that because the Lummi Nation needed some emergency funding for the Nooksack because there was a low water year and a problem. What did we do? We changed our grant rules. We provided them some money so that they could deal with that emergency. We should do the same thing for regulation. If we're having a problem fixing a salmon issue, we shouldn't sit around and say, well, we'll think about this. We should do something. And so that's what the bill would do.
Yeah, it seems like we've had a number of years now where, with the diminishment of salmon, where we could have acted and didn't, and so that's helpful. Heidi asked the question: how does the salmon bill align or not align with the federal approach to removing the Snake River dams and putting the tribes in charge of salmon recovery?
It does not at all. The bill is only one. It's only a state bill, so it doesn't apply to Army Corps of Engineers or federal regulations or things like that. It would only impact state regulations and those sorts of things. The other thing is that, of course, the decision to destroy the dams, right, we would oppose that. There's lots of silly things that we could do. The regulatory issues would only come after that decision was made about how to do it. So fixing culverts, things like that, you may say, well, I think it's too expensive or whatever. But at the very least, if the state is going to do it, we might as well do it fastest and lowest cost. And so that's what this would do.
Anything else in the legislature captured your attention, Todd?
Many things. There's a bill tomorrow that would demand transparency for how gas and oil companies set their prices. This is a transparently political move to try to blame oil companies for the price increases due to the tax on CO2 emissions. So they want to pass a law that would require oil companies to turn over all sorts of information so that politicians could blame them for increasing prices, when of course it's the tax on CO2. So that's tomorrow. Last week, there was a bill to ban small engines like lawnmowers, leaf blowers, snow blowers, things like that, in the name of reducing CO2 emissions. But it does nothing to reduce CO2 emissions because gasoline that goes into those is already covered by a strict cap in Washington state. So we already have laws that apply to the CO2 emissions from those. All of this would do was duplicate those laws and add cost, but wouldn't actually reduce any more CO2 emissions. So that was that. There are a number of other bills on climate policy and environmental policy, but I'll stop there.
Let me play a devil's advocate there and say, well, what if you're somebody who says, yeah, but there's signatures that are going to put the cap and trade tax on the ballot in all likelihood, and so we're not sure that we're going to continue with these caps. So we're going to put all hands on deck, and we're going to have maybe multiple layers of policy there to make sure that our climate is addressed. And if that means banning, small engines like lawnmowers and leaf blowers, that's what we've got to do. It's better to act now than wait. So what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, that there's a certain logic to that, right? Which is, why have one law when we can have 3 laws that do the same thing? And that way, if the one law doesn't, gets repealed, then we have 2 more laws. You don't get any more environmental benefit. You just waste a lot of money and effort. And the thing is that what I hear all the time is, well, we don't have enough money to do the environmental projects that we need to do. It's like, yes, that's because we're wasting money. adding insurance policy on top of insurance policy, adding duplicative layers that do the literal identical thing for just more cost. So there is an opportunity cost to wasting a lot of government time and money and wasting taxpayer money that could go elsewhere to things that need to get done. So, yeah, I mean, politically, sure, you can have 10 regulations that do the work of one, but then you don't have the money or flexibility to do other things that do need to get done.
It also makes it so you never have to prioritize. You never have to decide what actually makes effective use.
Yeah.
What's the cost? What's it going to do? Hey, on that bill that would ban gas engines, I can't recall. Does it require the government to give up or public entities to give up their gas engine equipment within a certain period of time? Because I thought it did, and then what my first thought was what a colossal waste, because you'd have all the shelf life of these engines. I mean, I had one lawnmower for a very long time, and I think I gave it away to somebody else before just because I didn't need it anymore. But there's a long shelf life to a lot of this stuff. So what they would end up doing is having all of there's spent costs on these items, and then you'd end up supposedly having this environmental benefit, but only because you're pretending there's a blank slate, by getting all these new ones.
Yeah, the bill itself doesn't, if you have I have a gas-powered snowblower, it would not require me to get rid of that gas-powered snowblower and replace it with an electric one. But there is a financial incentive. They do have a bucket of money for local jurisdictions to switch over to electric equipment, causing exactly the problem that you are talking about, which is, you have equipment whose lifespan could continue, but instead we're going to throw that away and buy new equipment using state money. And again, there's an opportunity cost. That $5 million could go other places. $5 million, a lot of salmon recovery projects that we do cost $5 million. There's a lot of salmon recovery projects that don't make the cut, where the funding runs out before they get it. So why not, instead of spending $5 million to replace perfectly good equipment that adds no environmental, no CO2 reduction benefit, why not take that $5 million and put it somewhere where it does make an impact? But those trade-offs, those opportunity costs are never considered.
We have one more question from Tom. He says, tell us about the gas tax rebate. Do I get one for each car registered in my name? What if I have gas, diesel, and EV?
I haven't paid much attention to that bill because I don't think it's going to pass. I think that the majority and the governor are just going to damn the torpedoes. Obviously, we just found out today that the initiative to repeal the tax on CO2 was certified by the Secretary of State. So the legislature can address that. They can pass it, which I don't think they will. They can provide an alternative so that there would be two competing alternatives on the ballot, or they can just ignore it and let it go straight to the voters. I don't know which of those two alternatives, or which of the two last options, whether they will provide an alternative or not, will occur, but I am fairly certain that we won't be seeing any rebates this year.
Yeah, I think I would not take you up on a bet on that one.
Don't spend that money. Don't spend that money in anticipation.
Not when you've got a governor who's since 2014 has known that the increase to the price of gasoline would be 44 cents or so or more a gallon, and they've been able to pretend that they're shocked to find out that there's an impact on gas prices.
Yeah, and it was repeatedly promised that he wouldn't raise taxes, and then raise taxes every year.
Yeah, and then in the midst of big inflationary prices, a home inaffordability, grocery prices skyrocketing, the thought is, well, too bad for you commuters. Well, I just jacked up a major cost of getting to and from work, getting to childcare and everything else. I'm not going to worry about it. So that's my general feelings, as you can tell, are pretty pessimistic on that. Todd, always appreciate you coming on, and of course it's a weekly event and you're covering so many areas. We're bound to talk again very shortly with Washington Policy on the Go every week for Washington Policy Center. Thanks so much for coming on today. I know you got a lot of work to do.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, every week, as I said, Washington Policy on the Go will bring you center directors during your lunch break for analysis and updates on the legislative session. We look forward to seeing you next week, and you'll get a reminder email the day of. A lot of folks email me and say, well, why didn't I get a reminder, a few days earlier? It's every Tuesday now, so consider this your reminder. And the reason we don't is I want to minimize any spam. I want to make sure that people are just getting the emails that are really relevant to them and what they're getting right now. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week.